Hello, and welcome to China Forum, the leading educational program for discussing the latest trends and developments in Chinese politics, economics, and society. My name is Amanda Conklin, and I will be your moderator for this program. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Chi Wang, President and Co-Chair of the USChina Policy Foundation, and Professor at Georgetown University. Professor Wang has produced China Forum for over 20 years, and he himself used to be the program's moderator. Professor Wang, I'm glad you're back to join me for this program.
Thank you, Amanda, for inviting me to come over here today.
Professor Wang has dedicated the majority of his life to improving U.S.-China relations. He was born in China and later came to the U.S. for college. He ended up staying in the U.S., earning his B.A. from the University of Maryland and his M.A. and Ph.D. from Georgetown University. Professor Wang worked at the U.S. Department of State's Foreign Service Institute and then the Library of Congress, eventually rising through the ranks to become head of the Chinese section. Professor Wang has also taught history courses at Georgetown University, and he continues to act as an advisor for graduate students. Professor Wang has made several significant contributions to U.S.-China relations, including representing the U.S. government in 1972 negotiations to establish cultural exchange projects with Beijing. After his retirement from the Library of Congress, Professor Wang founded the U.S.China Policy Foundation in 1995. This year marks the foundation's 20th anniversary. Thank you for joining me again today, Professor Wang.
Thank you, Amanda.
Let's get started. Can you just start with a simple question? What made you interested in U.S.-China relations, and how have you followed this interest throughout your life and career?
Well, Amanda, that's a very important question. Also, very difficult for me to answer, but I answer your question very briefly. And when I was a child in China, in Beijing, I went to American Missionary School. I had a number of teachers from America, and that also gave me interest in America. And later on, at the end of World War II, and I met 2 or 3 American diplomats in Beijing. For example, like Oliver Clubb, he was Consul General in Beijing U.S. Consulate, and also Mr. Howard Sullenberger. He was Vice Consul at the Consulate in Beijing. When I was in high school, I liked to visit USIA to watch American Second World War movies. So I got know these people very well during 1946 and 47. And they said, I expressed Sullenberger, and he said, Mr. Wang, what's your plan after you graduate from high school on the school that I know that you were principal, Ernest Shaw? I said, no, that's a good question. I said, I'd like to go to U.S. Okay, you should go to U.S. That's one reason I went to I decided with my parents, I'm going to study in the United States after I graduated from high school. So I did that. I came to U.S. and in 1949, September, first stop New York City, and then I transferred because my father asked me to study agriculture. I have no choice but to go to University of Maryland. I was accepted by Columbia and Cornell. I didn't go. I went to University of Maryland, College Park. I finished my degree in agriculture. I found out I couldn't use my agricultural technology in the U.S. At that time, the Korean War already started. I couldn't go back to China, and so I later on changed to study history. In fact, I like history. I like the motion picture. I took some courses at American University about TV production. That's why I'm interested in TV production. And you asked me why I'm interested in American-China relations. When I was in U.S., first coming to U.S., I found out American people, even our allies in World War II, but most American people know very little about China. Sometimes they didn't know what's going on in China. But everybody knows Chiang Kai-shek. Everybody knows Madame Chiang Kai-shek, because Madame Chiang Kai-shek was a very charming lady and gave a speech to the American public in 1942 when she was invited by President Roosevelt. But I told myself, when I have a chance, I want to promote understanding between U.S. and Chinese people. That's how I got interested in China-American relations. Let me tell you some more. In 1972, you just mentioned, I went to China. I was suggested by Dr. Kissinger's office in the White House. They want to send a person to Beijing to negotiate the cultural exchange, education exchange. And the Chinese side suggests you must find somebody can discuss with the problem with us in Chinese. We don't need an interpreter. That's why my name came up in the White House because of Ambassador John Holdridge was an advisor to Dr. Kissinger and President Nixon. They said Mr. Wang is probably the best choice to send him to Beijing. That's why I got a chance to go to Beijing. When I went to Beijing, I left China in 1949. I went back to China first time after 23 years. I saw that China is not the China I wanted to see. Everybody was looked so. I don't know how to describe it. It's just everybody wearing gray or blue uniform, and the people live in a state isolation. I was invited to visit Beijing University, Beida, and also so many other cultural institutions, museums, Forbidden City, Palace, and when I met the president of Beida, Beijing Daxue, Beijing University, and the president at that time they called Chairman Revolutionary Committee during the Cultural Revolution time, 1972. It's still going on in Cultural Revolution. So Dr. Zhou Pei Yuan was the Chairman Revolution Committee, kind of president of Beida. He asked me, Mr. Wang, if you have a chance, you should involving Chinese young people, understand more about America, understand more about Western world. I was really touched by his. I know him before I left China. I know his two daughters, learning ballet in U.S. and went back to China in 1947. And I don't know what happened to them now, but I know Dr. Zhou, the president, very, very sincere, asked me a number of times, when you have a chance, tell American people, try to engage Chinese intellectuals, scholars, students. We need outside people understand China. Also, Chinese young people should go to U.S. to understand more American. At that time, we have no diplomatic relations. How could you do that? So I came back. I talked to Ambassador Holdridge, and then we discussed how to involve more Chinese young people come over here. That's why we have a number of delegations come over here, mostly scientific delegations. Not even one so-called humanities or social science, because that's a very, very sensitive subject during the Cultural Revolution. So I was sent to China to discuss, to bring a non-scientific delegation. I was successful. They agreed to send a library delegation, because I worked for Library Congress. Library Congress was pretty happy. By 1973, the first Chinese library delegation by most prominent Chinese academics, librarians, 12 people come to U.S. That's how I started my U.S.-China relations adventure.
And when did the thought of the foundation start? How did that thought process turn into reality?
Yeah, I think it's, between 1972 to 1980s, it was a period harmonious. American people, U.S. Congress members, they all visited China from every year from time to time. For example, like Senator Mansfield, Senator Hugh Scott from Pennsylvania. These are the people interested in knowing more about China. Particularly Senator Mike Mansfield, he passed away. He was a U.S. Marine in Tianjin in North China. So he told me, he said, I'm interested in China. So he said, Mr. Wang, you should do more to promote understanding between Chinese and American people. Later on, Mansfield became ambassador to Japan during, I think Carter administration. He liked China. And Senator Hugh Scott liked Chinese culture, antiques, art. That's why we have a number of member Congress have a strong interest in China. That's how U.S. and China relations was in a very smooth, I would say, pretty normal situation. Chinese students began. I proposed to the White House. My good friend, he passed away several years ago, Dr. Michael Oxenberg. He was a student of Dr. Zygmunt Brzezinski, advisor to Carter, and we have lunch near White House over every month, talk about how to improve relations with China. And I told Mike, I said, I think we should have some students come over here. That's how the student exchange developed. Not by me, but I was one of the persons to suggest to exchange students. And in that meeting in the White House, West Wing building, some member of U.S. government agent, employee said, Mr. Wang, if you suggest, are they coming here to be spy? I said, come on. I was here, 49. I didn't do a spy job for China. You should be more flexible to accept Chinese students. Of course, there's maybe some problem in there, but our main goal is to let the Chinese young people learn more about the Western world, not just scientific, social science, economic. I think that's my minor contribution to promote U.S.-China relations. I remember I welcomed the first group Chinese scholars, students come over here, 40 some, most of the middle-aged 40-year-old, because they still, in China at that time, studied Russians. Nobody studied English. So this is how I involved in China-American relations. And you asked me how the foundation was established. The foundation was established after 1989, June 4th incident, the so-called Chinese crackdown on students' demonstration in front of Tiananmen Square. That was the end of a so-called honeymoon period. If not because President George H.W. Bush, he was one of the first person went to China to develop a relation with Chinese people. I met him once in Beijing, 1974, yeah, in front of a Chinese American embassy compound, introduced by Ambassador Holdridge. He was deputy chief. At that time, no diplomat, we called liaison office. And President George H.W. Bush was the second liaison office chief. The first one was David Bruce, a good friend of Nixon. I met them both. And they told me, Mr. Wang, you should do some more for us, for Chinese people. And after Tiananmen crackdown, American sentiments, Chinese are butchers. They just kill all the students. We don't know how many students possibly died during that incident. But anyway, it was a tragedy. But George H.W. Bush sent two high-level American officials to visit China. Acting Secretary of State Larry Eagleburger and General Brent Scowcroft, advisor to the White House and National Security Council advisor. These two went to China, reassure Americans want to continue the relation with China. After that, the relation always kind of difficult. And when Ambassador Hummel, Arthur W. Hummel Jr., he was ambassador to China from 81 to 85. He retired, come over here. We get together, have lunch almost every month. He said, Mr. Wang, you're born in China, you're educated here. What do you think about China? I said, I don't know. I think that we should have a good, close relation. He said, do you think we have some kind of organization, non-profit, to promote understanding between Chinese and American? I said, well, that's already one organization in New York City, National Committee for U.S.-China Relations. And in fact, talk about that, I was one of the founding members in 1966 in D.C. here, April, about 100 people, mostly retired foreign service officers, suggest to the American people we should have an organization to restart understanding the Chinese issue. That's how the National Committee on U.S.-China was founded in 1966. And I don't know how many people still around. I'm probably the only one still around here in D.C. here. And I represent Georgetown University and Library of Congress. And so Ambassador Hummel, Ambassador Holdridge, Ambassador Chet Freeman, he was at that time was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Securities. Well, you get together. Sure, we should have some kind of an organization. I said, first thing, we need money. We need funding. So we all started looking around for fundings. We didn't want money from government. We wanted some private enterprise support. Finally, I was able to raise enough money to start the foundation together with Ambassador Hummel, Ambassador Holdridge, Ambassador Freeman. This is 4 original founding members. Hummel passed away, Holdridge passed away, Freeman still in D.C. here, and we got together from time. He became a board member of our, also later on, of our foundation. That's how we started. And now 20 years now. That was 1995. We celebrate 1925. This year we celebrate 20 years. That's why I want to, I'm glad that you asked me coming to the studio to talk about the foundation 20th anniversary. This is how we got a foundation.
And what makes the foundation unique from other organizations like the National Committee that are other think tanks that talk about U.S.-China relations?
Yeah, the National Committee in New York, they've done a lot of good things for U.S.-China relations. And we are small. I hate to use the word small, but we are in D.C. here, the U.S. Capitol. We work on with the policymakers besides with American people. For example, we work with member of Congress and congressional staff members and local think tanks, also different federal agencies, especially State Department, and also DOD, Defense Department, and AID, and we work with them to try to develop a kind of understand what's the issue going on in China. And I also help American embassy in Beijing before the normalization of diplomatic relations in 1978. At that time, Ambassador Leonard Woodcock was the very important person to build a normalization process with Dr. Brzezinski and Michael Oxenberg, of course, President Jimmy Carter. The other one normalized diplomatic relations with China. I was involved in that. I was asked by Ambassador Leonard Unger in Beijing, please come to Beijing. I want to talk to you. Tell me how to work with the Chinese leaders. I said, I don't know. So we had lunch in his office, a sandwich, and I told him, he said your father was a government official, but I said he passed away. That was 1930s, a long time ago. I said pretty much the Chinese leaders are doing the same, similar style in handling politics and diplomacy. So that's why I was involved with kind of a informal consulting basis. And later on, even the White House, like President George H. Bush's office, his chief of staff, John Sununu, would call me many more times, talk about how to work with Congress to develop. I work for Library of Congress, so I know many of the members of Congress. I help them do translation, writing briefing papers. When they visit China, come back, I tell them what it is, and that's why I involve. We are pretty unique, and we also have a promoting to have a so-called congressional staff delegation to go to China 2 or 3 times a year. Every time we have 10, 12 young American policymakers to visit China for 18 years. How many? If you have a 20 a year, that's about 300 or 400. That's a lot of policymakers went to China. And this is kind of something we do. We also publish a journal, Washington Journal Modern China, twice a year. We try anyway. And we also have a student exchange. We also train interns of college students come to our foundation to learn more about China. And we also have a few young American graduate students and also like academic people from different parts of the United States to work for the foundation in short time, 1 year, 2 years, and then move on to some year. It's education. And we are small, again I said that, and we are very limited budget, and that's why we're not able to do bigger things like some other local non-profits. They have millions and millions of dollars budgets. We have even 91% of their budget, but we do the best we could.
You've mentioned how long the policymakers' trips have been sustained. In this program, you started it in 1990.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you've faced during this program over the years,
Right,
and
right.
what have been some of the
Right.
rewards?
Yeah, I think it's because in 1980s, 1990s, early 90s, very little TV program about China. Even now, still, probably we are the only show in town to talk about U.S.-China relations. We have a lot of, for example, national networks. They only mention 1 or 2 sentences what happened in China, and that's it. By their own network people, like CNN, NBC, ABC, always talk about China. Just 1 or 2 sentences. Never one program devoted to China completely. I talked to my friend at the TV studio. I said, can you give me half an hour time slot? I want to produce a show called whatever it is, China Talk, China Forum, and I talked to, at that time, the vice president of Riggs National Bank, which is one of the largest banks in D.C. here, now no longer around. I think it's. I talked to the vice president for international relations. I said, I need some money to produce a program. How much you need? I said, well, how much you can give? Yeah, I give you $2,000. $2,000 fine. I just used a studio in Fourth Church to tape a program every week. I invited Ambassador Hamo, all the former ambassadors to China, all the older people. They're all gone now. And professor from local universities, like at that time, Professor Harry Harding at GW, and also Ambassador James Lilly. He was ambassador to China in '89. He picked up the pieces after the Cameron crackdown. And all these people, they came to the studio, talk about their experience, kind of oral history. Mm-hmm. Like what you asked me the questions. Tell my personal experience about China. They're most American missionaries, children, live in China. Like Howard Sullenberger. I will never forget Howard Sullenberger, but he passed away maybe in year 2000, something like that. And this is what the program, at the beginning, nobody noticed, but we have a lot of talent guests, important guests, coming to the studio to tape the program. First, we taped the program in Fourth Church studio. Later on, moved to GW. GW has been helping us for the past 15 years. So this is we have a lot of programs. I think those programs, if someday can be converted DVD, will be very useful for education purposes. Yeah, and it's very unique and only one. And not your YouTube. Mm-hmm. This is something that also social media very helpful to promote understanding of different issues. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm glad to have been part of such a wonderful program that's captured historical figures in U.S.-China relations. And what have been the Foundation's greatest achievements over the past 20 years, in your opinion?
That's a difficult question. I think I just keep doing things, and I think that we.
You've worked with some very important figures, both in China and
yeah,
the US.
I work. It was my give me many opportunities to meet many Chinese leaders, from Deng Xiaoping, in fact, from Zhou Enlai, and Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and then Hu Jintao, and then now President Xi Jinping. I met him first time in 2009 when China was celebrating the 30th anniversary of U.S.-China relations. I was invited by the Chinese government to go to China with another maybe 20 or 30 American representatives, including Dr. Kissinger, President Jimmy Carter, Mrs. Carter, and Dr. Brzezinski. All the ones have a contribution for establish diplomatic relations there. 3 Chinese Americans, myself, Gary Locke, former governor of Washington State, later on became ambassador to China, and then another Major General Zhang Fu, the first Chinese American become a general in U.S. Army. He passed away 4 or 5 years ago. We were there, and to celebrate the 30th anniversary, I couldn't believe. Of course, the first government office established here in 1973, May. I remember, I went to the airport to welcome them. Ambassador Huang Zhen, he passed away. Ambassador Han Xu, he passed away. Others, young people, all retired. I don't know where they are now. That's the beginning of up to 23 years, no contact. Just like a few days ago, President Obama wanted to reestablish relations with Cuba. I learned that news. I said, Jesus, this is a similar situation, but China at that time was unknown. Personally, I think I'm so happy and so proud of myself. I was able to go to China in '72. It was a big deal, in those years. Now, young people like you go to China every year. You can go, but without that first step, it's difficult. When I went to China first time, I was in Hong Kong. I waited for 3 months for the signature of the signature. Without his sign out, I couldn't go to China. Another thing I enjoy most, I got a chance to meet many American diplomats, leaders. I met President George H.W. Bush. I met President Clinton. I met Hillary Clinton. I met Senator Bob Dole. I don't want to give you all the names. This is a great opportunity for me in Washington, D.C. here. Mm-hmm. Important Chinese come over here. I got a chance to sit down with them for dinner or lunch, whatever. And I go to China. I was invited by the Chinese leader to have dinner, lunch with them, and have meetings. For example, last year, I led a delegation, an American military delegation, with Admiral Bill Fallon. He was the commander-in-chief in Pacific Command. Mm-hmm. Several years ago, I went to China with Admiral Dennis Blair. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences with me and for coming here to discuss the foundation. I look forward to seeing what it will accomplish in 2015, and I look forward to your new book coming out, Obama's Challenge to China. I can't wait to read that. To all of you joining us from home today, thank you. I'll see you next time on China Forum.